Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Wade Acuff, and this is Creative Kickoff. What are we doing today? Well, we're going to be talking about match action cuts, or match action, or match cuts in general, but match action mostly. And I do have to explain that a little bit. But first, I want to say hi to chat. What's up, chat? So let's see a lot of familiar names. We got Val, Voodoo Val, hold down the fort with the moderation. What's up? Umacorn, Penny Doodles, how's it going, everybody? Well, match action. What is it? Well, I'm going to see if Val can drop a link for us in chat. It has a little bit of overview of just match cuts in general, but we're going to be looking at match cuts specifically, where there's typically where you have two scenes that cut on a hard cut, but there's action in one that continues in the other after the cut. Doesn't have to be the same subject. Just as long as that motion is very similar. And we're going to be looking at that and using it with our type for our motion design. You've all seen this. I'm sure you've seen it on TikTok where the back flip or the front flip or whatever. And in the middle of the flip, they change location, but the motion of the flip continues in the next scene. That's basically a match action, but we're going to be looking at that with type. So let's go ahead and do that thing. So I was messing around with this before, so I have a couple of comps already open. But before we jump into the comps, let's look at another example. Let me see what I want to pull up here. So we have our intro, the intro we just watched. Let's see if I can make this. There we go. Okay. So I think this only has like 2 or 3 cuts in it at all. And we'll go through some other things, but I want you to look at some of these. So let's just play it real quick. This is not the intro, but in case you're just coming in, you can always catch the replays over on YouTube if you've missed anything. So we have our first cut coming up here, and see if you can see it. There it was. We do have a match action. It's not a one-to-one, but if you watch this pencil start to drop out of frame, it continues in the next cut. So it's real quick. So that's a way to keep that transition, that movement alive. There's another one at the end here with these rockets. We start up with a close-up of these rockets moving up, and the action continues in the next frame after the cut. So it's kind of that same motion happening. Think about that with type. And the reason we're talking about it with type is to basically break this down so that it's simplified and the typography, the motion design you're making with type doesn't get overwhelming. You can kind of break it down into chunks that work for you. But real quick, I want to show you one more thing in this intro that I think is really cool and something to think about. As this pencil is turning at the beginning, you see the rotation as our subject comes into frame behind it. That's just a nifty little trick as well. It's at the same speed, and they both have an ease in that slows down at the same time. So just something to think about. We'll come back with some more examples in a minute, but let's go ahead and make our first little thing here. Let's start a new composition. It's just 1920 by 1080, nothing crazy. Controller Command T for our type tool. I'm going to pick the font that I want to use, and I'm going to type, let's see, well, it's empty. There we go. Move, and real quick, if you select this, you'll see that our anchor point is not in the center. If you want to make that in the center, there's a nice little command that is Control-Alt-Home, or if you're on our Mac, it's Command Option, and it will put the anchor point in the middle. And then I'm going to use our alignment tools to kind of align this up. We have our first little thing here. Let's see, our first layer, second layer, I want to name this over. These are very self-explanatory, I think. I'm going to turn my guides on here. And I'm going to move this over here. I'm just using these guides to let me know where these are in space. And I'm going to scale these down real quick. Select both. I'm going to make some adjustments. Move these over here. Okay, so now I'm going to turn off over. Let's see, you can turn this off. So we're going to focus on just moving our move layer. Press P to pull up our positioning. I'm going to add a keyframe by using the stopwatch. and I come to about a half a second, about 14 frames. Now, obviously, you can do whatever you need to do for yours, but this is just for this example. I'm going to move over to its new location. I'll put an easy ease on both of these with F9. So there you go. And if you do want to put an ease on these and then edit it, you can go hop into your graph editor and change some of the timing. I'm not going to do that because we are a little bit stretched for time, a little push for time. So we have move. I'm going to show you how simple this is. Let me take off the easy ease on the end, and you'll see why. And I'm just going to press, if you press Alt bracket left or right, it will cut your layer to where the timeline player head is. So I'm going to do that. So now we should turn over on. And this is a little bit of typography, sleight of hand, I guess, because as this plays back, it just kind of pops into saying over. It's not really a match cut at the moment. It's not really that same idea because over doesn't move at all. But we can really, see how this is already going to work. I'm going to slide this over. Let's see. First, we have to animate to make this an actual match move, that is. I'm going to go ahead and pull over all the way in and go and add the frames to this real quick, keyframing this. And I want to match the same speed, so I'm just going to move this first frame over to where we start with the move layer. So now we're basically on the same time, except that first one is eased. Let's go ahead and ease that. So now we're essentially there. Now all we have to do is slide our layer visibility over, and then we get something like that. So it's another smooth transition. If you want to make this a little bit smoother, you can, of course, turn on motion blur for both our layers. So it's a little bit smoother. I don't know if the playback is going to be smoother. You can also tighten these up so that it's a little bit faster, a little bit quicker paced. But you can see, and I'll change these over to different colors. Let's see, let's go orange and blue. So now you can see this is a hard cut. We're not actually blending anything, but the eyes are going to blend it and make sure that it works for us. So super simple, not a lot to, there's not a lot to explain about this. You kind of see what's happening. What I would do with this, and we'll do this later, is I would add a null object to do this animation so that you can keep your type layers free to animate however you want. But we'll do that again in a minute. I want to look at another example right now. We're going to jump into another, let's see, we don't need this guy anymore. We're going to jump into another example. And this one is our Protips example. And again, this one has a ton of cuts, but it also has some consistent elements that we want to look at as well. But let's just watch it through. And this is a countdown, essentially. It comes up at the end here. We get our 3, our 2, 1, and then we go. But these are all hard cuts. Real quick, a countdown, if you're not familiar, this is kind of an ongoing project for educators, and you get assigned in animation classes the countdown. It's kind of a thing. Every time I see a countdown, I always think of all of the countdown. It's just a way to kind of test your creativity on how to make a countdown exciting. But it's pretty standard as far as when you're in an animation course of some type. But let's take a look at a couple of things. So we're talking about consistency here. So this bird flies in. We have a bird element, a timeline element, some other thing floating around over here. But there is a cut. Now these transitions have a lot to do with scaling in, scaling out. The bird stays pretty consistent. And then this is a transition. That is a hard cut from here to there. And I'm just thinking about these in cuts. Now I wouldn't necessarily call that a match cut because the whole scene isn't changing, or things like that. But the individual element is what's changing. So that's the way I want you to think about the type today. All right, so here we have, this is where it gets real interesting because our 3, 2, 1, now there's a lot of shapes happening, a lot of pushing in, pushing out of shapes. And that's basically what's leading this. But if you look at the 3, it kind of moves forward. And then as it does that, it transitions into the hard cut here to the 2 coming at you, also scaling up. And it's the same situation with the 1. Everything blooms out. And then this next hard cut is the shapes shrinking in. And I think only this transparency pane remains, the framing there. And then everything forms that Creative Cloud logo. But the idea of the shapes moving, it's the same thing. You do the same thing with type. In fact, we could do a shapes one later at some other time. But that's what really drives this whole thing. And all these are hard cuts. So thinking about that and moving on to our next little example. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in chat. Let's make a new composition. Again, Control-T for our type tool. And then I'm going to change this to another font, not March. March cuts. It's a different thing altogether. Again, select it, Control-Alt-Home, or Command-Option-Home, and then use our alignment tools. And so this one, like I was talking about with the previous example, probably should have been animated. We probably should animate this with a null object. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, we can go ahead and make our second word here. It's going to be cut. And I may get rid of this later. I'm not sure how I want to do this, but just to kind of give us the idea. We have 2 words here, match and cut. Like I said, these examples are pretty specific and literal, but that's okay. I do want to make a null object. You can, of course, go into Layer, New, Null Object, or Control-Alt-Shift-Y. And then I'm going to select these other 2 layers, pick whip them to our null. So now they're both controlled. If I grab our null shape, they're both controlled by our null. And you can name this anything you want. We could rename this to control. It doesn't matter. But this way, I'm just going to animate that one thing, that one null object. And I want to do this. I'm going to press S. We're going to scale this. We're going to animate the scale. So we're going to kind of do an example of that 3, 2, 1 as it's coming at the frame. We're going to do that in this case with our match cut words. And I want to scale this up really big first, really large. Actually, let's turn off cut. I'm going to go real big here. Add a keyframe. I'm going to come into about 8 frames or so. Scale this back down. Somewhere in there. Zoom into my timeline a little bit so I can see what's happening. I do want to ease into this. So I'm going to add an ease in. And then I want a couple of roving frames because I want to kind of scale it up just slightly. Let's see, maybe around 3 frames after that. And I'm holding down Control or Command to change between the roving and the hard keyframe. If you want to know what that looks like in the graph editor. So this is what it looks like with that roving on. It's going to make more sense in a minute, but if you turn that off, it's just a straight line that comes in there. Anyway, back to that. And I want to continue this animation. It's going to scale up a little bit. Of course, that changed my keyframe. I want that to be roving as well. And then I want to come down about 2 or 3 more frames. And I'm just making this to taste. I don't know what this is going to look like until we do a preview. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere 3 more frames. I don't know. And scale it all the way back down to our final. You know what? I want it to match the original one. So I'm going to copy where we landed. So that now is the same size as where we first scaled down. So let's take a look. I'm going to change this to roving so it kind of rolls through that stretchy part. Okay, it's not bad. It's not great. It's a little fast here. I'll pull this out just a little bit. Okay, works for me. And we're all set. Like literally, we're pretty much ready to go here. We don't have, all I have to do now is take my cut and turn it on. And then we can use our Alt bracket. Oops, wrong way. To cut this down where we need to. And we should get something. I'm going to hide this first frame. I'm just going to roll this back so we don't start with that. Let's change this to end. So we get a visual match cut that happens just based on the movement. And remember we talked about, I think I may have mentioned, so the word choice of our earlier example, move and over, they're pretty similar. Like same size, 4-letter words, not forbidden 4-letter words. I'm looking at you, chat. But they're fine because they're both sort of the same. They're about the same length, so it's going to really lend itself to that sleight of hand. But match and cut are very different, but it still works. And I've not added any motion blur to this. It's just because it's so quick of a movement. But we can add motion blur. We can do a couple of things to kind of beef this up a little bit. Let's see if this motion blur is going to... Yeah, and you can still see the cut and it's fine, but it does ease that transition to the next word. All right, so what else could we do? We could add a little bit of wiggle to this. If we hit P on our, on our controller and go to position, if you Alt-Shift equal to add an expression, you can also come up to animation. Right now it's telling me to remove it because I just added one, but it's the same location. But I want to add a wiggle to this. Just start typing wiggle, click enter, and the first is going to be the time, and the second one's going to be the distance. So we've got 10 frames. It's going to move 5 frames every 10 frames. So let's see what that looks like on our wiggle. Let this RAM preview happen. I don't think it's quite frenetic enough, so I'm going to increase the amount of time. Let's see here. There we go. I think that works a little bit better. There's other things you can do to this. And again, we're not talking about making this look good because this is just an example of, how you can trick your eye with type. That's really all this is about. And, put it on a tilt. Of course, it's going to look better because it looks more like a stamp or something happening. I don't know. Like I said, just an example for you. But speaking of examples, so I did do a little bit of an intro, just real quick, just to see what I could come up with. And I'm going to walk through this a little bit. Let's play through it first. Let's see. Let's play through this first. And this is just using all of the things that we just talked about. And just play through it again. Super simple. Now I will say this, and I'm gonna emphasize this with if you're going to pick audio for your intros or anything you're working on, do that first. Do not try to match beats. It's so much easier matching animation to the beat than it is vice versa. So make sure that you have audio if you want. Don't try and hunt for something after the fact because you're just going to wind up reanimating a lot of the same things or sliding a bunch of stuff over. So just a word of note. There is no audio component to this intentionally because I just wanted to get it done and to see what I could do real quick. None of these are super complicated. That's what this whole thing is about, is to kind of break down everything into, and I'm just using match cuts as an example because the match action in, per word, per letter, per frame, is a way to break down your typography. So let's take a look. You can tell this is a hard cut if you look on the timeline. I have welcome to your, and it is animated with just keyframes as they move up. And then right on the cut, all I did is place my creative kickoff at the same time as they meet each other. And then that is animated at around the same speed out of that movement. So as you can tell, super simple. And it works, tricks the eye, it's fine. And then the next thing we did was a little bit, has to do also with the consistency, like that. Remember the bird in the example where there was a consistent element? Well, in this case, all of these letters are flipping back as the creative moves into place to form every. But I kept the E the same because it was a letter I could use. So I'm walking through and E stays the same, but then even these little flips are cuts. They're all just a little bit of a cut, animated. They're animated individually. Nothing super creative about that, but the E turns into the V, the T to the E, I to the R, that sort of thing, until everything kind of flips away. And all I did for that is if you have, let me try to find if you have a type layer and you go into create shapes from text, that's all I did to get those individual controls. Let's see if I can pull this down. You can see here that all of these are animated. They're just animated on the scale, I think. I inverted the scale. There's also presets to do this. So like none of this is like a specific way. There's probably 100 ways to do the same thing. But this was just a quick way that I knew how to get this done. But that E stays consistent as we move on today. And then there's even at the end, let me roll this down here. There's even at the end a little bit of a move for the Adobe Live to move into place. So I just animated everything kind of sliding in as this mask comes on so that the Adobe Live is at the same speed as our other type. And that's it. At the end of that, it kind of goes away into like this almost reverse scale. And the beginning was nothing. All it is just popping on in time. But that's just a quick way to kind of think about breaking down all of your type into individual segments so that it's segmented. You're not overly overwhelmed by making things so complicated you can't think about. Just move from piece to piece, see how it works, figure out that piece as you move on to the next. It is best to lay these out, like if you know where you're going with it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have like an idea in mind, but as far as the transitioning, is using these as essentially a match cut per letter or per word is a great way to think about how to make this work for you. I think I just added a gradient at the back that kind of comes up, trying to emulate maybe a sunrise. I don't know. Don't come at me. Let me take a look. Key's got some advice in there. Good to see it. Oh yeah, that was the other thing. So if you set up your projects in such a way, let's go back to one of these. Let's go back to this one. You can easily change, if you have like a template, you make your project into a template. You can, you can now animate. We can change this to someone's name. I know it's not two names, but let's see how that works. But we've got, basically a template. Everything you make, and like even with this example, I could come in here, and because I left everything as just type, except for the creative thing, creative turning to every, pretty much everything is editable right out of, just switching everything. And there are ways to make that editable as well, just not in this example. But that is going to do it for us today. I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out with us. We have a lot of stuff coming up. We've got creating lower thirds with Nathaniel Dotson coming up, a pro tips after that, and more stuff even after that. I want to thank again everybody for taking the time to come by this morning. If I missed your questions, I'm so sorry. if you have more questions and you want to send them my way, please do so. That's going to do it for me. It's good to see everybody, and I hope to see everyone real soon. Bye, everybody.